West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
You have thought a lot about Donald Trump, and you have studied him a lot. You've been so involved in holding him accountable. When he said this week, if they're beating me, go down and indict them, and some of the pronouncements he's made over the weekend, I've heard that as kind of his authoritarian impulses getting worse. How do you hear them?
Well, the role of the government, in his view, is to advance his political fortunes and destroy his political enemies. So what would a second term look like? It would look a lot like Vladimir Putin in Russia. It would look a lot like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Illiberal democracy, meaning democracy without rights or liberties or respect for the due process system, the rule of law. And in fact, there's not much democracy left to it because their position is that they don't accept the integrity of any election where they lose. And that is a hallmark of an authoritarian party. They don't accept elections that don't go their ways. They refuse to disavow political violence. They embrace political violence as an instrument for obtaining power. And then everything flows from the will of a charismatic politician, and that is Donald Trump. In their book. So we're clearly headed into a completely different form of government than any of us would recognize as continuous with the past. Right-wing authoritarian government in league with Putin, Xi, Orban, Bolsonaro,
Putin
you
and
name
Xi
it.
and Orban, and those are some serious authoritarian dictators out there, but they're people, it sounds like you're saying people should look at if they're wondering what a second Trump term would look like.
Those are the people that Donald Trump and his family do business with. Remember, his son-in-law brought back $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, from Mohammed bin Salman. He pocketed that after 4 years of rendering favors to Saudi Arabia, including covering up the assassination, dismemberment, drawing and quartering of a Saudi American journalist for the Washington Post, and rendering all kinds of favors to Saudi Arabia. Well, multiply that times every authoritarian despot on earth, and that's what we're getting with Donald Trump, because they've made relationships with every autocratic, plutocratic, kleptocratic regime on earth. And they don't pretend to have any program for the American people. It's just about restoring Donald Trump to power. They literally didn't have a platform that they adopted last time around, which tells you what? Their platform is whatever Donald Trump dictates to them on any particular day. And we see our colleagues in Congress just taking orders from Donald Trump on everything from shutting down the government to impeaching Joe Biden for nothing.
I did want to ask you about one of the specific things. There was some reporting over this weekend in the New York Times about his immigration plans. And none of this is really surprising given what he's done in the past, but it described it as preparing to round up undocumented people already in the United States on a vast scale and detain them in sprawling camps while they wait to be expelled. I mean, there are a lot of things in history that reminds me of. What did you think of when you read that story?
Well, of course, there's been an anti-immigration immigrant impulse in America going back to the beginning with the Alien and Sedition Acts and the attempts to politicize and demonize foreigners to the country. Of course, the rounding up of Japanese Americans during World War II. So he wants to pick up on that strain, and that is a purely authoritarian program. I mean, they really have two programs. One is that, and the other is to pass what Mike Johnson wants, a national ban on abortion rights for American women with no exceptions for rape or incest. But they understand how deeply unpopular that is, so they're trying to downplay that for now. The cat's got their tongue. They don't want to talk about it. But of course, that will rise to the top the moment they think they can get it passed.
So let me ask you about Speaker Mike Johnson, who you know pretty well, it sounds like. He did release his two-step plan to keep the government open yesterday. No deep spending cuts, which some of the right wing want, but no funding for Israel and Ukraine. I haven't seen Democratic leadership make a pronouncement about what they think of it. The White House has kind of criticized it. What do you make of it? Is this something that could possibly be, does it have any legs?
Well, we haven't been able to study that new Republican plan yet. And obviously, we want to do everything in our power to keep the government open. So we're serving the American people. The problem within the Republican caucus is that they're caught in a double bind in two directions, right? If they go to try to fund each appropriation bill separately, then the MAGA right starts pasting all of this extreme right-wing graffiti on it. So there's anti-abortion stuff, there's anti-LGBTQ stuff, there's anti-DEI stuff, all of that. And then there are about a dozen Republicans who can't vote for that because they're in Biden districts and they won't go along with it. And they know
18 of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically signing their own political defeat by doing that. However, if they go for a clean continuing resolution, which is clearly the way to do it, then you get Chip Roy and the Freedom Caucus saying, no, this doesn't create the slashing reductions in expenditures that we want whenever a Democrat is president. They don't look for that when Donald Trump was president. And he, of course, created record deficits and was spending like a drunken sailor.
So are we, I mean, it's hard to, you're not running the Republican caucus, but we only have 5 days here.
Yeah.
Should the public be preparing for a shutdown?
Well, the best hope is that they want to give their new guy, Mike Johnson, some reprieve. I mean, they have put someone in who they think appeals to the common denominator within the caucus, which is a kind of theocratic agenda. And some of them are saying, well, he's like, the backup quarterback who comes in the fourth quarter. So don't blame him for everything that's happened. Give him a break here and go with what he wants. But the plan seems strange to me, but I'll reserve judgment on it. And, we're trying to operate with unity in our caucus behind Hakeem Jeffries and our leadership, because it's complicated enough with the Republicans falling apart on a weekly and daily basis. So if it's something that our leadership thinks they can work with, it's something that I imagine most Democrats will say we'll swallow for now.
We'll see. It could be a 5 days. So I want to ask you about Mike Johnson, because, you are a constitutional scholar. He is somebody who has said he believes the Bible comes first over the Constitution. I want to be clear. This is not about being a person of faith. There are many people of faith in Congress, of Democrats and Republicans. But saying that the Bible comes first over the Constitution, how problematic is that? Well, position second in line for the president.
Well, let's start with this. When we take our oath of office, we put our hand on the Bible and we swear to uphold the Constitution. We don't put our hand on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible. The Constitution is the governing document of the country. And we, of course, have a multiplicity of faiths, and people can choose their faith or no faith at all. And that's what Jefferson and Adams and Madison fought for with the American Revolution and the Declaration and the Constitution. I mean, the great breakthrough of the American Constitution was to rebel against centuries of religious conflict, the wars between the Catholics and the Protestants, and Inquisition and Crusade and witchcraft trials and all of that. They said, we want to put government on a secular principle, which is no establishment of religion, no religious test for public office, and free exercise. Everybody can worship exactly as he or she pleases. But I've got colleagues who get up. One got up not long ago and said the moral downfall of America was in 1962 with Engel versus Vitale, where the Supreme Court banned prayer in the public schools. And I had to remind him, no, the Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. As long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools, right? All the Supreme Court said in Engel versus Vitale is that the government can't compel you to pray according to a script that the government writes. And that case was from New York. The suit was brought by Catholic families saying that there was a Protestant prayer that was being imposed on everybody. And of course, that's the great argument, or one of the great arguments, for the separation of church and state and no establishment of religion. What happens is one church gets control of the governmental process and then imposes its theological orthodoxy and discipline on everybody else.
And that's why it's in place. Never has there been a greater value for constitutional expertise. So thank you so much for bringing it to us and for breaking down so many issues with us, Congressman. Thanks for joining me this morning.
My pleasure.
It is Monday, the 13th of November of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, River City Hash Mondays. That's right. Okay. You ever been into the real America? You know what a Monday hash consists of. Well, you know what's left over from the weekend. Come on. That's right. Waste not, want not. Okay. Well, how was your weekend? We didn't blow ourselves up. At least not us. The rest of the world seems intent on it. And when I say the rest of the world, I mean some of our neighbors, too. Yeah. It's heartening to consider that those who are flying the actual fuck Biden flags near the elementary school in town, it's heartening to know that they know who we are. So when the shit comes down and the camps, maybe they won't even wait for the camps to be built because they're already built. Let's be clear. But they got to get cleaned up. So maybe they're going to send us there to clean up the camps that we will have to live in. Because they're going to round up all us vermin. That's right. When I say vermin, I mean, yeah, we have been dehumanized to the point of, what's the term again? Oh, yeah. Well, it's not necessarily ethnic cleansing, though that's part of it. Very much a part of it. Yeah. So all of us, like me, who have made our, I guess, political, social, cultural, ethical, religious, et cetera, positions known for the world to see, and to apparently make us, not only the product, but the product. I guess they have a list of us, and they don't have to go very far. So, I'm not necessarily taking a list where I'm, noting down addresses, but I've kept a mental, accounting of those neighbors who I might want to look out for when the shit comes down. Yeah. Not all the neighbors, but you never know. It's always the one you don't suspect, right? Yeah. But those who have made their intentions known, yeah. I think maybe I'd look out for them. You just never know. So I always like to think that it would be similar to the movies, where somebody comes up, knocks on your door, and says, "You're gonna come with me," and you say, "No, I'm not." When in reality, what will happen is about 30 or 40 guys will show up at your door saying, "You're coming with us." In fact, they won't even say anything. They'll just grab you and take you away. That's heartening. Yep, so much for the peaceful transfer of power, huh? Yeah, well, boy, that was so quaint when we had it for so long. I mean, it was a pretty good run, don't you think? We went for a long time, even in spite of the fact that the political party who has now fallen into such extreme Nazi tactics had no, self-restraint in embarking upon treasonous actions back in the day. And let's look at one, Richard Nixon. What was his treason? Well, as we find out decades after the fact, LBJ was on the horn with the head Republican Senate leader, Everett Dirksen. Everett, you oughtn't to be doing what you're doing. It's treason. And what was the treason? Well, negotiating with our enemies in Vietnam to extend the war so it would help Nixon's election. Nixon and Kissinger effed up the Paris Peace Accords, Paris Peace Talks, because they did not want the Democrats to get a win. I guess you could say they were willing to commit treason to kick the libs. What else occurred? Oh, let's see. One, Ronald Reagan. What was his treason? Well, Iran-Contra, of course. Negotiated with the enemies of the United States of America so it would help them politically. And to the tune of American hostages being kept in Iran. Granted, we were able to get them out surreptitiously, but that was after the fact that Jimmy Carter's administration was, well, shall we say, cut off at the knees. And this is a guy running for office. So that was even before Iran-Contra. Because then later, because of what happened in Iran with our hostages, who could not be released during a Carter administration, or at least Carter not being able to claim credit for it. And then he was deemed weak. Isn't that the exact rhetoric a bully uses? You know, the victim is the perpetrator. He made that little wimp made me beat the crap out of him. I wouldn't have beat the crap out of him if that little wimp hadn't made me. That kind of rhetoric. Does that sound familiar? A party of bullies. Nazi bullies. Yeah, well, I don't know. I've been calling them MAGA Nazis. Maybe we'll just have to drop the Nazi and just call them MAGA and everybody will know what you mean. I'm a good MAGA. I bet you are. So, 70-some million people believe in that BS. Believe that Joe Biden did not win an election. It is an assault on the truth, and I cannot wait for Thanksgiving. Oh, my God. My sister will have invited my MAGA brother. Because, it's family. And there'll be some sort of unstated rule, or maybe a rule that says, let's not talk politics, and my brother will. And then as soon as anybody else gets into it, he'll say, we're not supposed to talk politics. Well, he gets to spew his stuff to kick the libs. And then if it goes just a tad too far, he'll just leave, and maybe that would be good. I get to see this behavior in microcosm. I know exactly what's going to go on. There is no actual debate with a MAGA. They have no idea what the truth is. This is another refrain I hear, especially from those who don't know anything about how government works. We make up our own rules. No shit, Sherlock. But you're not even really making them up. You're being told what to do or your knee-jerk reaction, and when one's knee-jerk reaction is to Nazi, what does that say? That's not genetic, I gotta tell you. Is that learned? Because we didn't learn that BS in my family. Takes a village to make a Nazi, maybe. Or maybe not. There are some who are just naturally inclined to be the choir boys in Lord of the Flies. And there are those of us who are naturally inclined to be Ralph. And look what happened to Piggy. We get to get a lot more Ralphs, right? I don't know if Simon counts. The choir boys always get the choir boys. Oh, it's fun marching in formation. Is it? We're going to regiment our society. Will you? Okay. We need more Ralphs. Okay. Just saying. Or I don't know. Maybe we need more Emily Dickinsons. I think maybe that would be the proper way to go, actually. Jeez. Okay, well, we could go on and on and on, and we usually do. Let's see where we are. Oh, yeah, well, we might as well stop this rant and give you a rundown on what we have in store for you in the curated part of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, as we start off in the Bistro Cafe at the top there, of course, a Trump second term would look a lot like Vladimir Putin's Russia. And you know why? Because, I don't know, he sat at the master's knee? Could be. On the rest of the menu, woman after woman after woman has died on an Alaska mayor's property, and no one has been charged. But they're indigenous women, so who cares? 2 California tech execs could face up to 20 years behind bars in a massive fraud case. You know, you sometimes wonder if those angel investors are finding that there's always the devil in the details. Okay, see what I did there? And commuters are urged to work from home or take public transportation after a massive fire over the weekend closed a mile-long section of Interstate 10 in downtown Los Angeles. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where over 100,000 people in Paris and another 180,000 across France marched peacefully against the surge of anti-Semitism in the wake of the war in Gaza. Oh, what? They didn't break in windows and doors at, I don't know, some art gallery? Wow. And researchers, farmers, and brewers want to safeguard beer against climate change. Well, they better hurry it up. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and maybe if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay those bills that are ever increasing, by the way. They never decrease. Why? But regardless, without your help, it would be very difficult to run this powerhouse of resistance, and so we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, you can do so even on Facebook. You can do so by going to @Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of those, except I think Kelly takes care of the Facebook page, but there you go. You can also follow me on those social media sites, including Tumblr and Instagram and yada, yada. And also on Facebook. I take care of it all. You can follow me at Justice Putnam or simply Justice Putnam. All one word. And it's 2 words in actual life, though it might be 3 when you count my first name. That's right. So, follow me at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and there you can find the links to the actual articles that have inspired us daily here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You can also follow the show on Twitter. It's just a template. I apologize. But you can find that at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Just can't find them on Stitcher. Not anymore. Okay. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe is by ProPublica by way of Raw Story. On a sub-zero Monday morning in March of 2020, police found another woman dead at the ex-mayor's property. 2 years earlier, the body of 25-year-old Jennifer Kirk lay curled at the foot of a bed, a rifle on the floor, strangulation marks on her neck, and a bullet hole beneath her chin. City police swiftly closed the case, declaring it a suicide. Now, police were back at the property where the lifeless body of Susanna Susu Norton, age 30, was discovered in an adjacent house, beaten and strangled. An autopsy determined the cause of death to be homicide. Kirk and Norton, both Inupiaq, had each dated sons of the former borough mayor, and the sons had previously been convicted of beating each of them. One of the sons had admitted to strangling Kirk twice before. Another pleaded guilty to kicking Norton in the stomach when she was 6 months pregnant. No one has ever been charged with a crime in connection to the deaths. In a state where women are 2.5 times more likely than the national average to be killed by a man, and Alaska Native women are especially at risk, elected leaders here who have repeatedly pledged action. The Department of Justice declared a rural law enforcement agency in Alaska following a 2019 report by the Anchorage Daily News and ProPublica on glaring lapses in local policing. 2 years later, the governor created a state council on missing and murdered Indigenous persons, and in 2022, new investigators were hired to solve cases like Norton's. Unexplained holes in the investigations into the deaths of Kirk and Norton call into question this commitment, a review by the Anchorage Daily News and ProPublica found. More than that, the events leading up to the women's deaths illustrate how police, prosecutors, and judges here have regularly given a pass and another pass to people accused of domestic violence and strangulation. police records obtained by the newsroom show that Kirk's body revealed signs of strangulation. Her boyfriend, Anthony Richards, son of then Mayor Clement Richards Sr., admitted to police he had caused the marks on the day she died. After reviewing the records, former police chief Ed Ward said the 10 red flags at the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention instructs police to look for in cases of domestic violence killings all appeared to apply to the scene of Kirk's death. Now, Ward did not work at the police department at the time of her death. Yet, the Kotzebue Police Department closed the case after a single day of investigation, labeling it a suicide before receiving the final autopsy report. In Norton's case, police never told her family she had been strangled, family members said. Police did not ask the public to help catch the suspect, as they had the prior year when a fire department dog was killed in the same neighborhood. They never interviewed key witnesses and failed to obtain a search warrant, leaving evidence uncollected. State troopers who took over the investigation into Norton's death in 2022 told her family they planned to travel to Kotzebue over the summer to investigate further. Norton's family says that didn't happen either. A department spokesperson said on October 27th that investigators had not yet visited Kotzebue for the case, but planned to do so by the end of the year. Oh, so I guess they're really on it, huh? Now, both Kirk and Norton had been victims of domestic violence at the hands of the two Richardson brothers. The Daily News and ProPublica found that state prosecutors repeatedly allowed the men to avoid felony domestic violence convictions for strangling or beating women, including Kirk and Norton. In those cases, the state offered the sons deals, allowing them to plead guilty to reduced misdemeanor charges such as harassment and receive slaps on the wrists, not prison sentence. In one sexual assault case involving a different woman, State Superior Court Judge Paul Rootman granted Anthony Richards, the mayor's youngest son, uncommonly low bail. Rootman explained his decision by saying he had worked with Anthony's mother and knew his father held elected office. Oh, I thought they were supposed to judge without favor. Rootman and two prosecutors, now magistrates, declined to comment through a court system spokesperson. Judicial officers cannot and do not comment on their cases in order to maintain the integrity of their decisions and to ensure that, for fairness reasons, their thinking is reflected solely in the official court record without extraneous commentary, the spokesperson wrote with an accent totally made up by me in the moment. Now, the article goes further, and it's quite an in-depth article, by the way. Goes further into how this area of Alaska, which is not so dissimilar to the rest of Alaska when it comes to domestic violence, especially violence against indigenous women, has a long history in this town, and of the men continuously getting away with it. Council of the San Francisco Chronicle brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Federal officials allege that the two leaders of a Fresno-based tech company defrauded investors out of tens of millions of dollars to prop up their struggling company. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of California filed a criminal complaint against Irma Olguin Jr. and Jake Soberall, co-founders of the tech company Bitwise. The complaint was accompanied by a sworn affidavit from FBI agent Chet Johnston that detailed the findings of a joint probe by the FBI and the IRS's criminal investigation team. Johnston wrote that in interviews, Olguin and Soberall admitted to forging financial records and misleading investors, saying they admitted to significant wrongdoing. The U.S. Attorney's Office issued a press release about the charge, a conspiracy to commit wire fraud late last week. The news comes nearly 6 months after Bitwise's sudden collapse, which left its 900 employees out of work and the firm declaring bankruptcy. Both of the former executives were sacked by Bitwise's board in early June and pleaded guilty in a Fresno courthouse on Thursday, according to the Fresno Bee. If convicted, Olguin and Soberall would face each up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. This final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Los Angeles drivers warned of potentially terrible traffic snarls headed into Monday's commute following a raging fire over the weekend that closed a major elevated interstate near downtown. Many commuters appeared to have heeded warnings. TV news helicopter views generally showed less traffic than normal on the freeways encircling downtown. Cell phones blasted a pre-dawn reminder for residents to plan alternate commuting routes and to expect significant delays due to the fire's impact on Interstate 10. Hazardous materials teams were clearing burned material from underneath the elevated freeway to make way for engineers who will ensure the columns and deck of the highway can support the 300,000 vehicles that typically travel that route daily. Temporary support structures were also being installed. Governor Newsom said that answering questions would be a 24/7 operation, but officials could not offer a timeline yet for when the highway might reopen. Commuters were urged to work from home or take public transportation into downtown LA. The mile-long I-10 closure between Alameda and Santa Fe Ave will have a ripple effects on surface streets and other key freeways, including State Route 60 and Interstate 5. The cause of the fire remained under investigation. Flames were reported around 12:20 a.m. on Saturday, ripped through two-story lots in an industrial area beneath the highway, burning parked cars, stacks of wooden pallets, and support poles for high-tension power lines. More than 160 firefighters from more than 24 companies responded to the blaze, which spread across 8 acres, the equivalent of about 6 football fields, and burned for 3 hours. The highway's columns are charred and chipped, and guardrails along the deck are twisted and blackened. My. All right. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, The King's Other Half. On election night, Democrats in Mississippi came within a few points of winning the governorship. Did the fact that their candidate was Elvis Presley's cousin have anything to do with that? Can't say, but with last year's Baz Luhrmann picture, and now a biopic about Elvis's wife, Priscilla, it's clear that the fascination with Elvis continues. Having said that, though, the Sofia Coppola adaptation of Priscilla Presley's memoir Elvis and Me, while in the universe, is very much Priscilla's story. Notable characters from other Presley sagas, like Colonel Parker, are relegated on screen to an undifferentiated gaggle of hangers-on played by extras. The story picks up in the late 1950s while the king is fulfilling his military service in Germany and meets the then 14-year-old Priscilla. She's infatuated with him, as was about every 14-year-old girl at the time. However, here, arguably the most famous man in the world is infatuated with her, and the movie is mostly a nuanced and revealing narrative of the pair's relationship. Elvis skyrockets, Priscilla grows up. Elvis spirals, Priscilla gains agency, and eventually ends things. Relative newcomer Kaylee Spaney does wonderful work here, showing strength rather than victimhood in a relationship that, even granted some leeway for historical and cultural differences, seems abusive. In late 2022, Variety and other outlets made public some emails between Coppola and the late Lisa Marie Presley, indicating that she had some serious issues with the depictions of her parents in a script she reviewed. No word if that was the final script, and Priscilla herself is an executive producer here, but liberties are not. Priscilla is a well-done film that seems thematically in line with much of Coppola's other work. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can you own a machine gun? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The first answer? No! Because the 1934 National Firearms Act prohibits the sale and ownership of machine guns. The second answer? We'll see. We'll see involves bump stocks. Remember October 2017 in Las Vegas when a man killed 58 people and wounded 500 more in a matter of minutes? By himself, thanks to a bump stock? An attachment that allows semi-automatic rifles to fire in sustained rapid bursts like a machine gun. After that massacre, the Trump administration issued a regulation banning bump stocks, and lawsuits ensued, with most of the legal attacks on the ban failing. But recently, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the ban was illegal, and the Supreme Court has agreed to decide the issue. Opponents of the regulation claim that the executive branch has no authority to unilaterally ban bump stocks. The Biden administration counters that the regulation is consistent with the 1934 law. Opponents note that 42 states have no assault weapons ban, and 520,000 bump stocks were purchased during the 9 years they were for sale. Of note, this case does not involve the Second Amendment. The court is not being asked in this case to rule that you have a constitutional right to own a machine gun, but rather that bump stocks should remain legal unless and until Congress acts. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. With an astounding 86.4% vote on November 7th, Maine passed a citizen ballot initiative banning foreign campaign contributions to state candidates and ballot measures. How much foreign money could there be in a Maine election? More than you think. Hydro-Quebec, a large Canadian power producer, conducted a multi-year effort to build a power line corridor through New England states. The company failed in New Hampshire, then spent $22 million in Maine to convince voters to defeat a ballot initiative opposing the project. In November 2021, 59% of Maine voters rejected the project, but a court ruled the initiative violated Hydro-Quebec's rights and the project moved forward. Federal rules prohibit campaign contributions by foreign entities in federal elections, but don't address state spending or ballot initiatives. The amendment to Maine's constitution prohibits foreign entities or subsidiaries with 5% or more stake from making contributions to candidates or ballot measures. It requires media to determine the source of advertising dollars for initiatives. It bans attempts to evade the rules and sets penalties of up to 2 times the expenditure. And it requires disclosure whenever a foreign government attempts to influence an issue in Maine. Similar bans were enacted in Minnesota and Alaska, and several state legislatures considered bans this year. We have more on Maine's initiative and the groups taking action at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1927. That was the day that the Holland Tunnel, connecting New York City and New Jersey, opened for traffic. Before the tunnel, the only way to cross the Hudson River from the city to New Jersey was by ferry. City officials decided to build a tunnel to alleviate congestion. But they had a problem. All those cars driving underground would cause a potentially deadly buildup of carbon monoxide. There had to be a way to ventilate the tunnel. Engineer Clifford Holland came up with the solution. Big fans located at each end of the tunnel could draw fresh air into the passage. The giant fans were nearly as tall as a 10-story building. In honor of his engineering work, the tunnel was named after Holland. But he did not live to see the completion of his vision. The tunnel also owes its existence to unionized labor, the workers who performed the back-breaking work of digging New York's vehicle and subway tunnels called themselves the Sandhogs. In a 1983 book about the Union, written by Paul Delaney, a worker recounted his memories of the Holland Project, saying, quote, "The turnover in workers was unbelievable. Men would work an hour or maybe a shift, and they'd never be seen on the job again. Even the strongest men were tired after 15 or 20 minutes in the air. And there was always the worry about being fired. If a man went for more than 2 sips of water during a shift, he was told to collect his wages and go home." 14 workers died on the project. More than 1 billion cars have made the trip under the Hudson River since it first opened.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 46 degrees Fahrenheit, under foggy conditions, expecting highs in the mid-50s. We had a bit of rain overnight. Should have only scattered misty rain today. Generally cloudy, though, with winds light and variable. Then cloudy overnight, lows in the low 40s with winds remaining light and variable. Considerable cloudiness tomorrow with more occasional rain showers, heavy at times, high in the low 50s, winds light and variable. Looks like we have no pollen registering on the graph at the moment. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30 inches. Visibility is down to 1.5 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 56 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 62 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 65 degrees and clear. Bagram is 45 and clear. Kyiv is 44 and fair. Hong Kong is 68 and fair. Tokyo is 49 degrees and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 57 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 58 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Sylvie Corbet and Barbara Cirque of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Almost 200,000 people across France, including over 100,000 in Paris alone marched peacefully yesterday, Sunday, to protest against rising anti-Semitism in the wake of the war in Gaza. Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne, representatives of several parties on the left, conservatives and centrists of Macron's party, as well as far-right leader Marine Le Pen, attended Sunday's march to the French capital amid tight security. Macron did not attend, but expressed his support for the protest and called on citizens to rise up against the unbearable resurgence of unbridled anti-Semitism. However, the leader of the far-left France party Unbowed, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, stayed away from the march, saying last week on Twitter that the march would be a meeting of friends of unconditional support for the massacre in Gaza. Well, they have the same sort of issue with their far left there as we have with ours. The Interior Ministry said at least 182,000 people marched in several French cities in response to the call, launched by the leaders of the parliament's upper and lower houses. No major incident had been reported, it said. Paris authorities deployed 3,000 police troops along the route of the protest, called by the leaders of the Senate and Parliament's lower house, the National Assembly, amid an alarming increase in anti-Jewish acts in France since the start of the war against Hamas after its October 7 surprise attack on Israel, in which Hamas broke a ceasefire, by the way. France has the largest Jewish population in Europe, but given its World War II collaboration with the Nazis and anti-Semitic acts today, opens old scars.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Melina Walling, Amanda Lohman, and Brooke Herbert of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On a bright day this fall, tractors crisscrossed Gail Goshi's farm about an hour outside of Portland, Oregon. Goshi is in the beer business, a fourth-generation hops farmer. Fall is the off-season when the trellises are bare, but recently her farming team has been adding winter barley, a relatively newer crop in the world of beer, to their rotation, preparing barley seeds by the bucketful. In the face of human-caused climate change impacting water access and weather patterns in the Willamette Valley, a region known for hops growing, Goshi will need all the new strategies the farm can get to sustain what they produce and provide to local and larger breweries alike. All of a sudden, climate change was not coming any longer, Goshi said. It was here. Climate change is anticipated to only further the challenges producers are already seeing in two key beer crops, hops and barley. Some hops and barley growers in the U.S. say they've already seen their crops impacted by extreme heat, drought, and unpredictable growing seasons. Researchers are working with growers to help counter the effects of more volatile weather systems with improved hop varieties that can withstand drought and by adding winter barley to the mix. Researchers have known for a while that beer production will be affected by climate change, said Mirek Trinka, a professor at the Global Change Research Institute. He and his team recently authored a study modeling the effects of climate change on hops out last month in Nature Communications that projected that yields in Europe will decrease between 4 to 18% by 2050. His first study on hops 15 years ago issued a similar warning to his latest paper. Climate change moves faster than we might realize, but still too slowly for many to notice. The fact that researchers have started picking up on this means that there's promise for adaptation and solutions in the form of farming changes. But Trinka still has his concerns. Hops decline in Europe means changes for American producers too. One craft brewery that gets some of their hops from Goshi said that the company is trying to replicate the flavors of German hops using new varieties grown in the U.S. because the ones they depend on from Europe have been impacted by hot, dry summers over the last couple of years. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.